I, 28 female, was adopted by my parents when I was just over a year old. They couldn't have children at the time, and from what I was told, they had tried everything. Fertility treatments, alternative methods, even considered surrogacy, but nothing worked. That's when they turned to adoption, and I became their daughter. At that time, I had no idea what was going on. Obviously, as a baby, I didn't understand the dynamics at play, but I grew up believing that I was just as much their child as anyone else could have been. I was the child in their lives, and I was happy, or at least I thought I was. Growing up, things felt relatively normal, at least until I hit about 9 or 10. That's when everything changed. You see, when I was around 10 years old, my adoptive mother miraculously became pregnant. Not with one baby, but with twins. Twin girls to be exact. The doctors said it was a miracle, considering all of the struggles they had faced previously. The whole family was ecstatic. My parents, their friends, and especially my grandparents, my adoptive mother's parents. I remember there being so much joy in the house, so much excitement, and I didn't fully understand what that meant for me. At first, I was thrilled too. I was going to be a big sister. I imagined all the things we'd do together, playing dress-up, building forts, and sharing secrets like I'd seen in the movies. I thought we'd become a tight-knit family, and that having siblings would make us closer. But reality hit hard. When my sisters were born, I quickly realized that the dynamic in the house had shifted in ways I couldn't comprehend at that age. My parents became completely absorbed in the twins, which was understandable to some degree, considering how much work newborns are. But it wasn't just the natural busyness of my parents. Slowly, they began to distance themselves from me in more subtle ways that became glaringly obvious as time went on. It wasn't just that they were disconnected. It was as though they were actively pushing me out of their lives. They stopped asking about my day at school. Birthday parties and outings that used to be celebrated with some level of enthusiasm were now afterthoughts, barely acknowledged. Where they used to be involved in my life, helping me with school projects, attending parent-teacher meetings, cheering me on at sports events, it felt like they were deliberately ignoring me now. Their entire world revolved around the twins, and I was quickly becoming invisible. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it. I mean, I was still a child, and I didn't know how to process what was happening. But it wasn't long before I realized I wasn't being paranoid. The turning point came when my parents sat me down for a serious talk, about a year after the twins were born. I remember sitting in the living room, feeling a knot form in my stomach as they explained to me that they believed it would be best for everyone if I moved in with my grandparents, my adoptive mother's parents. They framed it as though it was in my best interest, that I'd get more attention and care at my grandparents' house since they were struggling to handle the chaos of having twins. They made it sound like it was an issue of logistics, but even at that age, I knew something deeper was going on. I knew, in my gut, that this wasn't just about making life easier, it was about getting rid of me. Of course, my grandparents were more than happy to take me in. They adored me, and I adored them. In many ways, they were more like parents to me than my actual adoptive parents had ever been. They loved me unconditionally and treated me as if I were their own biological grandchild, which made the transition to living with them somewhat easier. But still, the sense of abandonment from my adoptive parents never fully went away. I was just a kid after all. How could I not feel rejected? Life with my grandparents was, thankfully, wonderful. They were patient, kind, and attentive in all the ways my adoptive parents had stopped being. They encouraged me in school, supported my hobbies, and made me feel like I truly belonged. They took me on trips, celebrated every birthday with enthusiasm, and just showed me unconditional love. I thrived in their care. My relationship with my adoptive parents, however, continued to deteriorate. While they were happy to pass me off to my grandparents, they still acted like they were doing me a favor. They'd invite me over for holidays and special occasions, but even then it felt forced. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was a guest at best. When I would visit, I noticed that my stepsisters had everything I used to have and more. They were showered with attention, love, and gifts, things that were increasingly scarce in my life before I was sent away. It hurt. Every time I went over there, I felt like an outsider, like I didn't belong in the family that had once been mine. The disconnect grew so wide that eventually, I stopped wanting to visit altogether. It wasn't that my adoptive parents were mean or outwardly hostile. They were cordial, but distant, as if they were trying to maintain some sense of obligation without truly engaging. They had their real children now, and I was a remnant of a past life they had moved on from. During this time, my grandparents became my world. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they had enough to live comfortably. They made sure I had everything I needed for school and life in general. More importantly, they gave me emotional support and love, something I desperately needed. They were always there to talk, to listen, and to reassure me that I mattered. A few years ago, my grandparents passed away. It was devastating. They were my true family, the people who had raised me when my adoptive parents had all but abandoned me. Their loss hit me hard, but what made it somewhat easier was knowing that they had left me something meaningful to remember them by. In their will, my grandparents left me everything they had. It wasn't a fortune by any means. Some money, their house, and a few small assets. But it was significant. It wasn't just about the money or property, though. What they left me was a testament to the love they had for me. It was their way of ensuring I was taken care of, even after they were gone. At that time, my adoptive parents didn't say much about the inheritance. They knew my grandparents had left everything to me, and while I'm sure they weren't thrilled about it, they didn't make a fuss. At least not right away. Fast forward to a few months ago. Out of the blue, my adoptive parents started reaching out more frequently. At first, it seemed harmless. Casual phone calls, invitations to family dinners, offers to reconnect. I was suspicious, but I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were finally feeling guilty about how they had treated me. Maybe they realized they had abandoned me all those years ago and wanted to make amends. But then, during one of these family dinners, they dropped the bombshell. They told me they believed the inheritance my grandparents left me actually belonged to their biological children, my adoptive sisters. They claimed that since my grandparents were their biological family, the estate should rightfully go to their bloodline. Their reasoning was that my sisters were the true heirs, and I, as an adopted child, wasn't really entitled to the inheritance. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the same people who had sent me away to live with my grandparents because I was no longer convenient for them. They had treated me like an afterthought for years, and now they had the audacity to demand that I give up what my grandparents had left me? I said no, plain and simple. There was no way I was going to give them anything. My grandparents had left that inheritance to me because they wanted me to have it. It wasn't about bloodlines or family trees. It was about love and the bond that we had shared. My grandparents had raised me. They had been there for me when my adoptive parents hadn't. The idea that I should just hand over everything they left me to the people who had abandoned me was absurd. That's when the threats started. My adoptive parents told me that if I didn't give up my share of the inheritance, they would sue me. They claimed they had a legal right to the money because my grandparents were their parents by blood. They argued that I was just the adopted child and that the biological grandchildren were the rightful heirs. I was floored. The entitlement was mind-boggling. After everything they had put me through, after sending me away, after treating me like I don't exist, they now wanted to take the one thing that truly mattered to me? The audacity was unreal. I've since spoken to a lawyer, and they assured me that the will is airtight. My grandparents left everything to me, and there's no legal basis for my adoptive parents or their biological children to contest it. But the fact that they would even consider suing me over this has shaken me to my core. It's brought up all the old feelings of abandonment, rejection, and being unwanted. It's like they're trying to take away that last bit of love and security my grandparents gave me. Here's where I'm struggling. On one hand, I know I'm in the right. My grandparents left me that inheritance for a reason, and I have every right to keep it. But on the other hand, I can't help but feel guilty. My adoptive sisters didn't ask for any of this. They didn't choose to be born into a family where their parents would treat me the way they did. And while we've never been close, they're still innocent in all of this. But then I remind myself that this isn't about them. This is about my grandparents' wishes and about the love they had for me. It's about the fact that I was their only grandchild in every way that mattered. My adoptive parents don't get to rewrite history just because it suits them now. They don't get to demand that I give up the one thing that reminds me of the only real parents I ever had. So, Reddit. Am I the a-hole? Am I the a-hole for refusing to give up my inheritance to my adoptive parents' biological children? Wow. OP's adoptive parents sound like absolute pieces of work. They basically abandoned OP when their biological children came along, and now they want to take away something that OP's grandparents, who actually raised and loved OP, left for OP? That's so messed up. The fact they'd threaten to sue OP over this just shows their true colors. OP owes them nothing. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Not the a-hole. The will is clear. Your grandparents left the inheritance to you, not their biological grandchildren. It sounds like your grandparents knew exactly what they were doing and how your adoptive parents treated you. You don't owe your adoptive parents anything, especially since they pushed you aside for their real kids. I feel bad for your adoptive sisters, but this isn't their fight. It's your adoptive parents' greed showing. Let them waste money on lawyers. You're in the right. Not the a-hole. And as a law student, I can confidently say that they don't have a leg to stand on. If the will explicitly names you as the beneficiary, then that's it. Unless they can prove coercion, or that your grandparents weren't of sound mind when they made the will, which seems unlikely given your description. Any lawsuit they file will be a waste of time and money. They're trying to push you into submission. Don't let them intimidate you. Hold your ground, and maybe even counter-threaten legal action if they keep harassing you. Not the a-hole. This whole situation is so sad, because it shows how some people value biological relationships over the ones that are built on love and care. Your grandparents obviously adored you and wanted you to have everything they could offer. Your adoptive parents are the ones who cut you out emotionally, and now they're trying to gaslight you into giving up what was never theirs to begin with. You did the right thing by saying no, and honestly, you owe them absolutely nothing. Just a weird situation, and I don't know what advice I'm looking for other than how to keep my cool and manage my relationship with my dad. I moved back home after college to go to grad school and take care of my mom while she went through breast cancer treatment. Sadly, she passed away last October. I'm an only child, and it was really rough on us for a while, especially during virus. So I was grateful to be able to keep living with my dad rent-free, both so we could emotionally support each other and so I could have some time to deal with everything while I looked for a job. I was lucky and found a work-from-home job with good pay and benefits in February. He asked me to contribute to utilities and the mortgage, etc., at a fair rate, and I started doing that. Before I started working, I was also cooking and making him a lunch 5 nights a week, and I've now cut that back. I've hinted in the last couple months that if things went well at work, I would be looking for an apartment in the city, 20 minutes away, affordable rent, lots of friends and culture there. I've been in therapy for the last few years to deal with first the stress of being a caretaker, really for both parents, as Dad has his own mental health issues, and then with the grieving process. I've been scared to move out and live on my own, but I've realized I've kind of put my life on hold, and I'd like to go out and experience my 20s. Anyway, enter girlfriend. This isn't the first person he's dated since Mom passed away. He's also been on dating apps and had a brief fling with a widowed family friend. It's not that I'm upset that he's dating so soon, since I understand he's lonely and grieving, though I'm kind of uncomfortable generally and would rather just not be around for all this. Another motivator for moving out. Girlfriend is also an old family friend. She went to high school with my parents, was my mother's maid of honor, and actually lived with us for a while when I was a kid. Hence why I've always called her Aunt. No blood relation, though. I can sympathize because girlfriend has had a hard time. Rocky marriages, divorces, rough family, upbringing, addiction, alcohol and money, legal problems. My mom was always kind of her protector, swooped in to lend her money or a place to stay. Girlfriend's alcohol use really got out of control the last 5 to 10 years. She ruined a lot of her relationships and caused a scene at family gatherings. Became generally impossible to have a conversation with because of how bad her addiction was getting. She generally doesn't drive anymore. The grudge I cannot let go of is how she completely abandoned my mother for the entirety of her illness. Radio silent for 3+ years, except for when she needed money or to vent about her problems. We heard from her family members that she was staying away because she just couldn't deal with Mom's cancer. Mom had very few close friends and confidants towards the end, and girlfriend ignored her calls and texts for months at a time. They only saw each other maybe 1 or 2 times in the last few years of her life, and that was when other family friends guilt-tripped her into it. Girlfriend did not make it to Mom's funeral. My mom was an endlessly forgiving person and would probably give me that advice. But I watched her get left in the dirt after being there for her best friend for almost 40 years. Girlfriend and I had a close relationship when I was a kid, but I do not have it in me to forgive her. I can barely sit in the same room and make polite conversation. My dad, suddenly and out of nowhere, reconnected with girlfriend a couple months ago. As far as I knew, they had not spoken since talking about the funeral 6+ months ago, and Dad has had just as big a grudge against her as I have. The two of them have had explosive fights over the years, usually over how girlfriend treated Mom. But according to Dad, people change. She's not drinking, only 50% true, and everyone deserves second chances. This is so laughably out of character for him to say that I can't even explain it. They have been spending every weekend together for the past couple months, either here at our house or on a getaway. He has to drive 40+ minutes, pick her up, because again, she does not drive, and bring her here, because she lives with her sister and mother. I usually try and get out of the house while she's over. Tonight, while she was here, I mentioned that I was officially looking at apartments. Dad got all wide-eyed and shocked, said, "Really? I didn't think you were actually doing that," and "Can't believe you're going to leave me high and dry." Then he turned to girlfriend and said, "Well, I guess I could move you and your crazy family in here once OP is out. Wouldn't that be funny?" They both kind of laughed, but it fell flat. It might just be a joke, but I can 100% see it happening. He is lonely, impulsive, and doesn't like looking after himself. She is lonely, unemployed, and pretty brazen. This is my worst nightmare. I cannot imagine her living here, in my mother's house. I am trying to accept that I have no control over what he does. Part of me wants to ask him not to do this, or to get his sister or my grandmother to talk some sense into him, none of which will go well, and will probably backfire. Part of me wants to delay moving out until they break up, which is crazy. He most likely wants me to stay until he sells the place, which is years away. I think you know the answer. You can't control what your dad does, nor can you save him from himself. He's clearly come to expect that he should be depending on you, and sounds a bit spiteful about you leaving to get to live your own life again. You can ask him not to do something, but to be honest, I have a feeling he will just realize that he can use that as leverage against you, to control you, to get you to do what he wants. Stay and continue taking care of him. You have to go live your life. You want to move out and spread your wings a bit. Please do that. You staying hasn't stopped your dad from dating girlfriend. There's a chance you staying won't even stop him from moving her in eventually. I know this hits you personally, and it's really hard for you, but you're going to have to let him work through this on his own. Take what is special to you out of the house. You will still have your memories of being with your mom. You can meet your dad elsewhere if you can't stand going over, but you can't stop whatever is about to happen. All you can do is make your own decisions about your own life. This is hard. It hurts. Talk about it with your therapist, but move out like you planned. Your mom would understand. My parents got divorced when I was around 13 because my father, 59, cheated on my mother, 59. I am no contact with my father for over 10 years. My mother, for some reason, blamed me for their divorce. She used to come to my bed late at night, shook me, and told me I was the cause of her failed marriage. We never had a good relationship, but this divorce made everything far worse for us. Whenever we had a problem, she would say that I am sick in the head, crazy, mental, and was in urgent need for help. As a 14-year-old kid who did not know better, I actually did seek for help and made an appointment with a therapist. The therapist told me that she needed to see my mother, too. I don't know what the therapist told my mother, but we never visited her again. Sometimes, my mother would tell me that the therapist told her I was crazy and a psychopath. If it was the case, why didn't my mother help me by taking me to the therapist? Isn't it what mothers do? Help their kids? I have a brother, 30 male, the golden child, who got all the nice things, praises and whatnot when we grew up, like any other golden child. I am not going to bother you with how he is the golden child and I am the unwanted kid, or it would take forever. My brother and I are university graduates. I studied in a foreign country for postgraduate, and last year I came back and started looking for a job in my home country. I wanted to work in the same city where I studied in university, where my long-term boyfriend lives, where all my friends are, and of course, where my mother does not exist. While I was looking for a job, my brother offered to help, and I moved in with him. He used to live alone in an old student apartment. I was so grateful that I cleaned the house, prepared our meals, did the laundry. In short, pretty much did everything around the house. My long-term boyfriend, 29 male, are good friends with my brother. Boyfriend used to come for dinner every night, and we would hang out. My boyfriend felt responsible for me and brought bags of groceries every day to compensate what he and I ate. I am a very independent woman and did my best not to become a burden on my brother, both financially and emotionally. After a month, during the holidays, my brother went to see our mother while I went with my boyfriend to visit his parents, who are amazing people, by the way. We left a day earlier than my brother and told him specifically to take out the garbage before leaving because we were going to be away for 10 days in the middle of the summer heat. We arrived a day before, and guess what? He left the trash in the bin as it is, on the counter. When I looked at it, I saw hundreds of worms swarming in it. I was cleaning the house and threw the bin away. We bought a new trash bin. Mind you, it was the exact same bin with the same color. When my brother came a day later, I told him what happened. He started yelling. His face turned red with veins pumping and walking on me. He was screaming at me and blamed me for making decisions in his home without asking him first. It was his house. I did not have the right to throw the bin away. It did not matter it was a $2 bin. It was his. I could not believe my ears. I was being yelled at for a trash bin that I replaced. I told him I would do the same if it happens again because it was gross. He then told me to leave his house. I did, and moved in with my boyfriend and his roommate. The next day, my mother called me and asked what happened. She asks these questions, but she never listens. She believes what she wants to believe. Me trying to explain to her my side does not mean anything. So I told her I did not want to talk about what happened. She says, "It is your fault. It is his house. You don't have the right to his stuff. He is your brother. You gotta obey him." I lived with my boyfriend and his roommate for 5 months. They both are lovely people and never made me feel unwanted, even for a second. It was a tough time for me. No house, no job, no money. Not long after, I found an amazing job, found an amazing house, and boyfriend and I moved in together. I wanted to help my brother like how he helped me. His house was falling apart, old, dirty, inconvenient, and pretty expensive for only one person. I told him that he could live with us for a couple of months, save money, and move into a better place. I told him not to worry about the rent and other utilities, because we are family, right? This is what family does for each other, right? It was a good call, cause a week later, our country went crazy with coronavirus. He moved in with us just in time. My boyfriend and I started buying furniture, a happy lamp there, a little table here. It became our house that we built ourselves. My brother never cooked, cleaned, bought groceries, or offered any help around the house. I felt it was inconvenient, but he was our guest. I was repaying my debt to him. 2 weeks later, I bought a TV for all of us. This is important. My brother became obsessed with this TV. He would watch movies, documentaries, and shows all day, every day. We were working from home, so he had all the time in the world. One day, my boyfriend and I were preparing the meal in the kitchen. I told my brother that food was ready. He turned the TV on and left the room. We eat in the living room. While I was laying the table, I switched the channel to a news channel. He then came back and complained about the news and switched the channel back. I told him we should all watch something that we can all enjoy. He insisted that he came first. We were going to watch what he wanted to watch. I told him to switch it back. He did not. I told him to give me the remote control, and he did not. After demanding the remote control the 10th time, he threw it away to the floor. I told him he cannot throw stuff in my house because it did not belong to him. I told him he was not doing anything in the house to help, but at least let us rest and enjoy our life while we can. For the next context, my boyfriend and I both study for our postgraduates, have jobs, and work in the house. My brother got up and started yelling. He screamed that my job was easy, but his job is very difficult. He was working his butt off, and we were just writing emails for the show. I told him I was not going to apologize for having a nice job. Not easy per se, but pays well. I worked hard for what I have. He then belittles me and my achievements. Not gonna lie, I did the same. I belittled his achievements. He then cursed at me, which is a taboo for me, by the way. My mother curses at me for the simplest stupid things, so it became a taboo for me, something I would never do to my family. I find it very rude and unforgivable. We stopped talking. Next day, my mother called me, asked what happened, and I refused to answer. She then told me it was my fault and told me to be polite to him because he was a guest in our house. We made him uncomfortable. He was my brother, and I gotta obey him. If there wasn't a lockdown, she would have come and placed her child into a better house. A 30-year-old man-child. Hypocrite? Yeah, I know. It has been 3 months since we stopped talking. 2 weeks ago, I broke my ankle and started working from home again. Last Friday was a tough day for me. I had assignments lined up, Excel sheets I needed to work on, and this constant, excruciating pain in my ankle. Late at night, my mother called and asked me to listen to her about my brother. I told her I can listen, but only listen. Nothing she says can change what I think, and I refused to make a comment on the fight we had with my brother. She then started to cry and told me my brother had to order takeout because there was not food in the house. I then realized I was so busy working and trying to make it to the deadline that I forgot to eat. It was not important, of course. My brother had to order takeout. Unthinkable. Today I was laying down and watching TV. He stopped watching it after the fight. My brother came to me and said, "As your brother, I came and am apologizing for cursing at you. I know I am right in the fight, so I expect you to apologize." I told him I did nothing wrong and was not going to apologize. He said that I was 100% in the wrong. When I refused, he told me I was sick in the head. I was crazy and ill. He was saying things as if my mother was talking. He told me I had narcissistic personality disorder. I was selfish, spoiled, self-centered, and all the dirty things, as he claimed. He told me he was done, and I was dead to him. I asked my boyfriend what he thought. He told me my brother suffers from favoritism. I remember that 14-year-old girl now. Should I do what I did years ago? Or am I being manipulated into thinking I am mentally ill as they claimed? I usually blame myself for everything. I went to 2 more therapists, one overseas, one here. After our talks, they told me I was not mentally ill. I don't know. If someone tells you something for years, you start to doubt yourself. What if they are right? What if I am right? What do I do? It's time to evict your brother. Since he's been staying with you a while, he may have tenants' rights, at least if you're in the U.S., so you might consult with a lawyer over how much notice you have to give him to get him out. It's time to go no contact with your mother. It's time to go low or no contact with your brother. It's time to talk to another therapist, because your controlling brother is bringing up old self-esteem issues brought on by your controlling mother. Your brother and mother both treat you like utter crap. They do not deserve you in their pathetic, hateful little lives.